Hello, everyone. This is Lacey with the Your Lyme Matters podcast, and I am joined with Payton Bradsky, and she is joining us all the way from New York City in New York in the United States of America. So she's joining us from afar. So hello, Payton. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I'm excited.
Yeah. And so her brother is actually Carter Bradsky, which is the episode prior to this one. And Payton, tell us a little bit, what are you guys developing? What is the name of it? So that people know right off the bat what you guys are founding here.
Yeah, so we're creating, it's called Lymeless Health. It's a patient application, and we're looking to sort of empower patients, but also providers and researchers and diagnostic companies and sort of connect the dots across the Lyme ecosystem. We were patients ourselves, and I'm sure we'll get into all that. So this is kind of our culmination of that experience, I guess.
Awesome. Thank you for doing that intro for me. You take the heat off me, so thank you. So we're super excited about the Lymeless app, and we will chat about that a little bit later on. So first off, let's just get to know you a little bit. Have you lived in New York your whole life, or have you lived elsewhere?
Yeah, so I have lived quite a few places. I grew up in South Dakota originally, and then I ended up going to college in Santa Clara, California, which is in Silicon Valley.
Okay.
I studied computer engineering there. It was really a shot in the dark. I went and did that and was just interested in technology, but had no background in coding. But it worked out. So I studied that, moved to Seattle for a year.
Is that a difficult program? Did you complete it? Did you finish it off there, or did you transfer somewhere else?
Yep. I finished it there, and it was challenging for sure. It was so foreign to me, and a lot of the people in my classes had been coding since they were in middle school, and so it was pretty intimidating at first. And a funny story going into it, I thought coding was zeros and ones, and so I memorized like binary numbers before my first coding class, which is not, if you're familiar with coding, that's not coding at all. So so lots of good, wake up calls in that experience.
That's good.
Yeah. So I went to school there, moved to Seattle for about a year. COVID hit. And then my brother was moving to New York, and I love New York. So I decided to transfer and move with him.
Okay, nice. And how old are you currently today?
I'm 27.
27. And what were you doing in your life, like, for fun? Like, what was your lifestyle like before you got sick, leading up to it?
Yeah, I was definitely a outdoor person, loved hiking and, being in nature, but also sports and running and snowboarding and rock climbing and all the things. I love kind of adrenaline things. So it was always just finding new experiences like that. And then obviously getting sick threw a little wrench in that at times, but definitely active outdoor person for sure.
Okay, yeah, rock climbing, that's an interesting one. Did you do that inside or outside or both? Is there mountains around there that you can climb on there?
Outdoor. In South Dakota, it was mostly outdoor. We have these really beautiful granite, like, spires,
okay.
which, most people think the middle of the country, like where South Dakota is very flat. But we have just
that's why I asked. I didn't know. I was like, is there something to climb, or is it like this high?
Yeah, exactly. There's just this little outcropping of mountains called the Black Hills where I grew up. So it's mostly flat, and then we have this really pretty area where we were. Yeah.
That's awesome. Okay, yeah. So you were living sort of the outdoorsy active lifestyle then.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then so you completed the engineering program. Did I get that right? And then what from there? What was next for you?
Yeah, I studied engineering and entrepreneurship and things there, and then I went to work for Google for the next 4.5 years, and then that led up to now. I left Google about 6 months ago, and have been working on Lymeless since then.
So that's a big leap, but it's such an exciting leap, I would say personally.
Yeah.
What was that like when you and Carter were starting the chats about a Lyme/chronic illness health app?
Yeah, it was interesting because I think we both are patients, and we went through the experience of treating Lyme, and it's brutal. It's so complex and complicated, and even when you know Lyme exists, right, and you know to look for a diagnosis, it's still challenging to get the right treatment and have effective treatment and get to a point where you feel like you did before you got sick. And so when we were going through that process, it was a lot of conversations about how technology could just help this for people. And technology is really good at taking complex situations and problems and personalizing them, right? Like exactly what Lyme treatment is, coming up with the best way to treat someone based on all the different characteristics that they have. So it really was a lot of kind of brainstorming and coming up with things we thought would be useful, and then talking to more patients and kind of figuring it out that way. Yeah, but taking that leap was really a big deal. And I think we both believed that we got Lyme for a reason, and this is that reason. It's kind of trying to turn that into something, because it just feels so, I don't know, it makes it more purposeful, I guess, right? This challenge that was so rough and brutal, especially so early on in life, probably similar to why you started the podcast.
Exactly. It brings, too bad your brother will hear this, but it brings a quote, I can't remember where it's from, but it's, actually, no, I think it was from a previous interview with a Lyme literate psychotherapist, and I think it's Mediev, and she said, when there's a why, you can endure anyhow. It makes it easier to cope through it just for whatever reason, but it makes that last bit of healing, or even the middle, if you start at the middle part of your healing, it just makes it a smidgen easier to kind of pull through some things. So it makes me think of Maria there. There we go. I remembered where I heard it, so I got to give her proper credit. And so what was your life? So we've got a bit of your active lifestyle in there. What was it like in terms of stressors? And the reason I ask this is because it seems to be, for some people, there's a mix of a certain stress, I'm going to call it soup, like all the different stressors in that soup in the years leading up to the person getting sick. So mine, for example, stressful work environment, stressful relationship, always sympathetic nervous system activated in unsafe, unidentified work situations. So I was constantly wired up. For you, when you look back on it, was there any stressors that may have contributed to weakening your immune system a bit for the infections to come in and then do their nasty business?
Absolutely, actually. And it's funny you say that, because looking back and just really analyzing, right, everything leading up to this, that was my big conclusion, is that stress is what triggers my symptoms every single time. Okay. And so the first time, when I first started getting really sick and looking into a diagnosis, I was in my senior year of college and getting into, taking tons of credits and finishing our senior design, our engineering projects, and interviewing for jobs. And all of it just culminated in this really stressful few weeks. And then the week leading up to what is kind of like a big event that really triggered all my symptoms. Okay. I was having, I was super dehydrated, like physiologically stressed, not just mentally stressed and overwhelmed, but also just, super dehydrated, had gone snowboarding for 3 days and had done, pulled all-nighters and just crazy amounts of stress in that 1 week that I think really set everything off.
Okay, yeah. And you were saying even today, kind of looking back, you're realizing that that's a trigger for, sounds like, feeling unwell or flare-ups or things like that? Yeah.
I honestly spent, probably 4 years treating, and I would get really sick of it. I'd get really frustrated while I was in treatment because it felt like it wasn't working. Like I would get better, and then just go back downhill. And so I'd stop treatment every now and then because I was just so fed up.
Burnt out.
Burnt out. And so I would kind of coast on my symptoms and be okay. And then stress would come in and just take me right back down again. And I'd have to start treatment again. So every time I re-entered that phase of stress, then I'd get symptoms and then I'd have to go back to treatment.
Okay, yeah. And that's similar for me too. And it seems that those symptoms, they follow some similar pathways as stress, like emotional stress responses, physiological stress responses. So you had these stressors leading up to it. And also, just as an FYI, we hear here with our engineering programs that they are very demanding, competitive, and we have from what I've heard, a high flunk out rate. So when you said you were in that program right away, I was like, that could be a difficult program. That could contribute to some stress for sure. With your active lifestyle, do you remember getting bit by a tick then, or are you someone that just started developing symptoms and then later said, this might be Lyme and co-infections?
Yeah, the second one. I never have seen a tick actually,
Yeah.
ever in my life. So, now I'm all up on watching all the news and following all the, Lyme disease accounts and seeing all these ticks on my Instagram feed. And yeah, but I've never seen one and never gotten bitten. It was just something that came up later.
They're a bit creepy looking, to be
Oh my
honest.
gosh.
Yeah, I've not seen one like on my own skin also, just like you. I see them
Oh,
everywhere
really?
else, but I've
Mm.
not yet seen one. So
Wow.
lucky,
Okay.
lucky us, I guess, if we haven't seen it.
Right.
I did have a lump on my thigh though that was queried to be a bite right after a hike.
Okay.
So probably because they spit anesthesia, like when they numb you at the doctor's office, so you can't
Mhm.
feel them even if they're there a lot of the time. So yeah.
Wow.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they
that's
spit. They
wild.
definitely spit something similar to anesthesia. So yeah, the whole thing where you should have seen it, did you see it or not? Deciding treatment based off that is uh, doesn't make much logical sense, to be
Hmm.
honest.
Did you
Yeah.
have a rash or anything with it, or was it?
So I'll send you a picture after the episode here. It's the strangest thing. It was let's see if my fingers. Wait, where's my screen? So yeah, it was a lump on the side of my left thigh, this big, and my friend and I had hiked to the top of the mountain. And we knew that we'd be running down it, so we wanted to sit on the meadow, which is, we were very zero informed about the risk of doing that. I was wearing shorts because it was warm out. And we
Hmm.
sat there, we're like, wow, it's a beautiful, the top of the mountain, this like glacier looking lake. Then we went back down. As soon as I got to my car, I looked down, I was like, what is this? A mosquito bite? A pimple? And I pushed on it, nothing. It just, so mine's atypical. So that's something to be aware of. There was no erythema migrans, however you say that.
Hmm.
It was simply just, it stayed that way the entire thing for years, never went away, but my symptoms started within the week after that.
Wow.
And the earliest symptoms were actually a predisposition to yeast infection, urinary tract infection,
Hmm.
bacterial vaginosis, and like kind of feeling unwell, malaise, like in my glands and stuff, which is also not a typical first symptoms for people to have those ones. But it was like all of them just at once, and that was not usual. I'd have them separate sometimes,
Yeah.
but my system was already struggling enough that it allowed all of them, and it was super painful. So yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's wild. Oh my
Yeah,
gosh.
yeah. So it shows, I guess, how different everybody is, and
Exactly. Right.
yeah. And in your case, it sounds like that might be a bit of a mystery still, or is there some hypothesis, or is it?
Yeah, it's a bit of a mystery still. There's more research coming out about how you can pass to your children. Moms can pass to their babies. And so it's possible. My mom tested positive first out of all of us. She had a whole experience with Lyme and being bedridden and everything else, and not having the exposure to Lyme disease and ultimately finding out. So that's why my brother and I were able to get to the point where we were tested and treated. But she had it first, and then I got it, and Carter has it, and we have two other brothers, and one of them also tested positive. So that's
Oh,
kind of
really? Oh, I didn't know that.
yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Is that a newer positive, or is that a previous?
It's a previous one. He was, he's slightly positive for some co-infections and doesn't have a lot of symptoms. So we're kind of just waiting it out to see.
Feeling that out? Yeah.
Hmm.
Sorry to hear that, because you've got a lot affected in your family already. So
Right.
I would imagine that's a unique challenge in itself to have multiples for sure.
Yeah, it was interesting. It was nice to have some, I don't know, camaraderie in it, I guess. Like we're going through it together, so
Yeah.
that was helpful, and some exposure and like sympathy for each other, and all of that was really helpful, because I think, it's tough to find people who understand this experience, and getting involved now and being more plugged into different patient groups and things like that. I can see that there's a lot of support, but when I was going through it, I didn't really think to look for patient groups or anything. So
Oh, okay.
yeah.
So you weren't quite as enmeshed in that sort of support, online support communities and things like that.
Exactly. Yeah, I didn't even think to look for
Yeah.
it. So, so that, I guess, was kind of our patient support group a little bit, by having
Yeah.
our family
Yeah, you
going
could have
through
sort
it.
of some like, fun type like races, like, oh, how far did you get with this treatment? Or, yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, and also some competition of like, hey, wait, that worked for you? Like, why isn't that working for me?
Yeah, you're like, wait a second. We should have
Hmm.
some similarities in our genes, genetics, and for everybody listening too, that there can be people develop symptoms without seeing a tick, without even having acquired tick not a bicycle. Yeah. So tell me a bit about your first symptoms. Like what exactly were those, if you can remember back to then?
Yeah. So I mentioned this a little bit before, but that week leading up to my first symptoms was that stressful week. And then actually had a moment where I woke up in the middle of the night. Luckily, my parents were there visiting me at school. But I woke up in the middle of the night, didn't feel very good, went to go throw up, and woke up on the ground. And my mom heard my mom on the phone, like, oh, my daughter just had a seizure, all this stuff. So it was very dramatic, very crazy, and kind of kicked off this whole exploration into, do I have epilepsy? Like, what are these seizures? And ultimately, like, long story short, we found out, no, I don't have epilepsy. And I tested for Lyme disease and was positive, and ended up treating, Lyme and then Babesia and Bartonella, and ended up treating, and have since, not had those same seizure-like episodes. But it was sort of a dramatic entrance into symptoms for me.
It sounds like it. Yeah. Dramatic, and almost, it could be for some almost like dramatic and a bit even traumatic, with if they're not used to having like the emergency call and like what happened type of thing.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
So after that, did you wind up getting seen by someone reasonably fast? Like when you're on the floor, I'm not sure how it works there. Does ambulance come here? An ambulance you can call and they'll come pick you up and take you. I don't know if it's the same there.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Same.
I was put in an ambulance, went to the hospital. They did tons of tests on me. They diagnosed me with epilepsy, put me on anti-seizure medication, which is brutal. I mean, like, your brain does not work well on that. It was really tough.
Okay.
And they took away my driver's license because
yes.
I'm not allowed to drive, and all these things, right? Very life-altering, like, diagnosis. Another one, really crazy. But they were doing tests on me, the EEG. They plugged a bunch of wires onto my head, and so surreal. But they did all these tests and didn't see any activity like they would with a typical epileptic patient.
Okay.
And so they kept saying, well, this isn't typical. You don't look like you're having seizures like we would expect. But they refused to let me go off the medication or give me and obviously, like, I'm capable of stopping taking it, right? But, like, you have to wean off of it, and it's a whole process.
Yeah.
But they refused to kind of take away that label and give me my driver's license back, because basically they just said they'll lose their license if I have a seizure and I'm driving or something.
Okay.
So it was kind of a battle almost, because it was a misdiagnosis that really would have sent my life on a totally different path, taking these really heavy pharmaceuticals forever. And so scary as senior year of college. And, one of the seizures caused me to have a major concussion. So I couldn't look at a computer screen either.
Yeah.
So I'm sitting here, I'm supposed to be a computer engineer, and I can't look at a screen, and I'm supposed to start a job at Google. And I'm like, what's my life going to turn into here?
Yeah.
And I feel honestly really lucky that it was Lyme disease, because it's something that we can at least try to treat and manage. And at the end of the day, we finally figured out that they weren't seizures I was having. It was fainting episodes that looked like seizures. So it's different, and it's similarly scary, similarly really visually looks exactly the same, but they're totally different. And so that was, luckily we figured that out, because I think it would be a totally different story otherwise.
Yeah, a key part in that assessment, to figure that out. And especially with all your results not showing typical epilepsy type of thing as well.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. But it took going to neurologists, different ones, and not the ones that refused, right? It took a lot of work finding those other opinions, basically, that would allow me to pursue this Lyme disease diagnosis.
Yeah. So I guess we'll call it now fainting episodes, I guess. Yeah. My brain's going somewhere about fainting goats, but it's my partner and I have a joke where if he gets scared, like spooked by something, he almost faints. And goats, I'm not sure if you know that there's goats that do that too. So, but it's probably not funny to people that legitimately faint and get injured, but it makes me think of how I have that joke with my partner as well. So going from there, so what did that look like symptom-wise? Did you get some more symptoms develop? Was it like slow symptoms develop as you're eventually going to get access to treatment and things like that? And you said you had Lyme, Babesia, and Bartonella.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, so you got three in there for your mix as well.
Yes, always. I feel like most Lyme patients end up having multiple superpowers when it comes to these co-infections.
Yeah, quite the mix for sure.
Yeah, so that was my sort of aggressive symptom onset. And then I started to have more physical symptoms, the body aches, the joint pain, brain fog, word recall. Down the road, I had a little bit of like social anxiety and depression develop that was out of the blue. Kind of went in waves with treatment. I think herxing obviously makes things worse when you're treating and it's working, right? But your body is handling the die-off and herxing happens. So some symptoms would get worse and some would pop up. New ones would pop up as down the road of treatment. So my main ones were probably headaches. And I realized I had them almost every day, even before this big episode, but just thought it was normal.
Yeah.
And then, once I got far enough into treatment, they went away eventually. So
what were your headaches like? Like, do you remember, was it a certain location on your head? Did it feel like it was inside your brain? Did it feel like it was like through your neck?
Yeah, good question. I think that really it was kind of this foggy, heavy feeling, and it was sort of all through the front and like middle part of my head. And then after really stressful days, I'd go to bed and feel really kind of toxic, like tingly, and in my neck it would be a lot of really, I'm just remembering the toxic kind of tingling.
Yeah, I know what you mean though. I do. Yeah, I couldn't find the words, but when I was describing it because I went through this whole phase where they don't really acknowledge it too, but I was like, I'm rotted. It feels like it's rot, like it's like unwell, like rotting from the inside, like just sick. And then sometimes to describe the headaches, that's the reason I asked, is I had such trouble verbalizing the words to explain those headaches to the people that I was hoping would help me. So in the brain, for me in the brain, exactly, it's like you feel ill, like I felt ill in my head, if that makes sense. Yeah.
Yes. And it's so hard to describe. It's so hard to describe. Yeah.
Yeah. And I know one time I remember seeing in the charting, they said patient describes it as internal rot. And I was like, I do.
I like that. That's so accurate.
I do describe it as a feeling of internal rot. So, yes. Yeah. And so did you get connected to the same practitioner as your brother Carter, the naturopathic doctor?
Yep, my mom had started with him, and then my brother and I both worked with him. And then I actually ended up working with a few other doctors too, just because my treatment took almost twice as long as my mom and my brother, because of those neurological symptoms that were really persistent and challenging. So he was my first for about 80% of the way, and then I ended up finding a Lyme literate neurologist who helped me with that last 15 to 20%. Yeah.
Okay. And out of curiosity, once you got connected with that Lyme literate neurologist, what strategy was that for the neurological in particular?
Yeah, I deliberately looked for someone who would do something different because I had spent the time in the first phase doing the antibiotics and supplements combo and then herbals too. So sort of that triple threat. And I just felt like I kept hitting a wall, right? A ceiling of feeling better. And so when I was working with this neurologist, they introduced some other more alternative therapies. We did use antibiotics. And then I also used something called SOT.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Are you familiar?
SOT, supportive oligonucleotide therapy.
Yes.
Supportive something like that.
I would go with that. I've actually never tried to say it.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. But
I think you're right.
Yeah, I don't know if I can go the full medical in-depth to explain what it does, but supportive therapy to help your body then better do what it needs to do is how I understood it. You can feel free to throw yours in there if you'd like.
Okay. I mean, the way I understand it, and again, like whoever's listening, we should look into it to themselves. But this is how it was explained to me is basically that they take you do a blood draw, you send it to this lab that's developing SOT, and they create almost like a key to the bacteria, the specific bacteria in your blood. And so when they do the SOT, it goes in and it sort of binds to the bacteria and doesn't allow it to reproduce.
Oh, okay. Oh,
so
interesting.
So it almost gives your body a little bit of a leg up on that, because I think there's that battle of I'm treating this, but it's reproducing, right? So how do I get on top of this and then process the die-off? And, there's all this whole system that's working
Oh, neat. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And we'll say to everyone, definitely look it up. But I think that's actually a really nice way for me to understand it a little better because I've never tried it myself. So yeah, SOT.
Yeah, definitely look
Okay.
it up. But that was the best explanation
Not
I
medical
got.
advice, but this is
No.
our personal opinion on what that means. So
Yeah.
there we go. And so tell us a bit about what the healing path was like for you, because I think a lot of people, they feel like they're sort of flail, like I pictured kind of a fish kind of like flapping around on, not in the water where it's supposed to be. You don't really know what to expect from when you start treatment. How early on did you know that your body is doing some healing? How early on in your treatments?
I think within the first few months, I started to notice some improvements in like my headaches or some of the physical symptoms that I had. Honestly, the biggest indicator I would use is herxing. Like I mentioned before, I think if I was doing a treatment and I noticed certain symptoms, they were very specific for me that made me feel like kind of toxic and heavy, like I mentioned, and this kind of tingling in my calves and weird specific symptoms.
Yes, I know.
You know
I
what I'm
also
talking
know
about?
what you're saying. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Yeah.
This is great because I
Yeah.
really, yeah, you never meet people really
We're
that
gonna
have
break this down for
this.
people in a bit here too. We're gonna
Yes.
make some even more sense of it. Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So those feelings, right? Okay, I'm herxing, it sucks, but it's working, right? Like I'm
And
doing
Payton, let's just really quickly, not,
Mhm.
again, not our medical advice definition of what herxing is, but
Yeah.
let's do our personal experience of what herxing feels like, and for everyone, herxing essentially, for me, like my personal definition of it is when you're killing something, a pathogen, and once you kill it, where does it go? For healthy people, their bodies can usually do their process and it's excreted out in many different ways: stool, urine, sweat. People, their organs are not necessarily functioning optimally, so they can't properly remove killed. And even the killed pathogens sometimes trigger the same cascades of cycles and steps inside you that still give you symptoms. So they float around in you, they recirculate, and you can feel very terrible. So that's that. I'll go over to Payton here. Is there anything you'd like to add on how you would describe? I think I heard you use the word die-off, and that is also accurate part of it, because that's another thing that's involved in it. Yeah, exact same thing, essentially.
Exactly. Yep. I think I would explain it the same way you did. The from what I understand and my experiences, when you are killing the disease, the bacteria in your body or the infection, then there's this die off, this that your body would typically be able to process. But when you have either so much of it happening because you have this infection that you're actively treating, or your body's not capable of processing it, then you have symptoms. It's overload almost on your system.
Now, Payton, tell me where your herx. So let's do the physical symptoms. Do you remember what your physical symptoms? I think I heard you say something about tingling, so we'll come back to that. What other symptoms that for you, Payton, you're like, yeah, I'm herxing? How did you know?
The tingling was the biggest one. And it was almost unbearable sometimes, right? Like if you've ever had restless leg syndrome too, I don't even know if that's actually a medical term.
That is 100% a medical term. Yeah, it's like literally a medical diagnosis, and it causes people quite a lot of issues, especially if they have it when they're sleeping, because they're unable to do that kind of uncomfortable, agitated movement even when they're sleeping. So.
Exactly. Okay. Yeah. So that experience, right? Where you're like, oh, I need to move. I'm tingly. I'm achy. That was my herxing, was a lot of that tingling, achy, sort of feeling just toxic and internal rot, kind of like you described it.
I gave you a new word. Now you and Carter, and even your mom, feel free to use this word. It really sets the story straight. If you're like, how do I feel? Like rotting. They're like, oh, okay then.
You can kind of understand that though, right? Like I think it's a very good description of it. So I would say that, and were the most physical for me.
Now let's move on to, did you have any psychological, like in your brain or emotional or mental well-being? Because some people have physical, some have that, some have both. So
yeah, my the mental, I think I did feel some of the kind of the brain fog, the challenge thinking through things, collecting words, remembering what I had just said, right? Yeah. And then really distinctly too, with very specific treatments, I would be super emotional out of the blue and just sob, right? Or just cry and have no reason for it. Okay, do you relate to that?
Yes.
Yeah. And I remember telling my doctor about it and I was like, I don't know if this is relevant, but
It
I feel like
is.
I just am overwhelmingly sad sometimes and it's just out of the blue. And he goes, oh no, definitely that's herxing or response to this
Yeah.
treatment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I recently described that to my own family doctor because I've had to do a referral for myself recently for that exact symptom set, the
Mhm.
constant on the verge of tears. And I felt like, am I regressing with my treatments? I don't understand.
Mhm.
And it turned out to be that I had a heavy infection load in my knee, which was putting me on the cusp of tears. And once that's called, like the bacterial load is lower, I'm no longer on the cusp of tears, aka I'm not regressing. I was starving for antibiotics for a nasty infection in my knee. And I was like that. I would just be walking, and my boyfriend would sometimes ask me, he's like, what's wrong? I was like,
Yeah.
nothing. I'm
Yeah.
just crying. And I cried on the what we don't okay, so what movie was it? Darn it, I can't think of the movie because that's one of my things even before I got sick. I'm so relaxed if I actually have the time, like the put myself in a position to sit and watch a movie that I don't remember plots or anything because I'm just really relaxed. My brain's not thinking. It's like, okay. So if you ask me about a movie I can't remember, but it was a really bad movie. It's a new movie, and we both agreed it was a bad movie. At the very end, there was a man crying because his love was killed in the battle of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
It was this, I want to swear it like shit. It's like the worst movie ever. And then at the end, I was just like, oh, like crying. And he looks at me and he's like, no, seriously, you didn't cry any of the sad movies. He's like, but you're crying like this movie. That acting was terrible. But I guess what got me was just the emotion of it. I was like, I can relate if you're losing someone. I just like crying.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yes.
So that's, to kind of validate that for everybody else out there. That is a legit part. It can be part of herxing. It can also be a part of simply if your pathogen load is still too high in your treatment process too. So that can be if you have it kind of just a constant. So the good news is that can be helped because mine was tremendously helped by those antibiotics. I was like thirsty for them, starving for them. So I also heard you mention the tingling. And so again, this is not medical advice, but it makes sense when the treatments that you're taking and doing are making it finally to these sites where you're improving blood flow. Maybe it was blocked by fascial tissue. That's super common with these illnesses. The thick stuff in your tissue that makes your like the lymphatic nodes that filter stuff get blocked up and stuff. We're having more movement. We're getting to these new areas. And when you're healing a wound infection, like on your skin, sometimes you have those feelings and sensations when it's healing. So it does sort of make sense that you have tingling down in the left side of your shin all of a sudden, and you're like, it's not quite like, maybe it's a bit itchy, but it's like an internal, and that can also be healing as well, which I've just recently discovered. So I love that you said that as well, because I've not yet had a chance to speak with someone in the community that's had that same experience yet. To date at all. So that's awesome.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
No, I feel the same way. Actually, it's really great to talk to somebody who's had the same experiences, right? Some part of me is like, I mean, that is what I felt, but is it real?
You wonder.
Right?
Yeah, you're like, but why would it be doing that? Like my practitioners haven't yet told me, and sometimes we can't see them as much as we want to like tell this kind of sub information that might not be make or break to like that day's treatment plan. So
exactly.
Yeah, so that can be part of it. And I'll add, for me, my herxes were pretty heavy psychological. So to help people listening, I would get very agitated. Like sometimes I would feel like I either need to go sprint, but running was not incorporated back into my plan. One day I just went outside. I was so agitated and ran, and my leg was not yet treated with the antibiotics. And I knew it was moving, but it was just like, and I was so mad, I just did it anyways. So I can get really mad. Labile is the mental health term, up and down, emotional, up and down. Or I can also get more cry. And sometimes, kind of feel sick if my body's not removing the toxins fast enough for me. And then once it has time to do that the next couple of days, I'm getting better, because my body's eventually catching the days before and getting rid of it as well. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's so fascinating,
It
really.
is.
Understanding your body on this deep level, right? You really get to know how your body responds to things and all the details and all the little ways that it is telling you what's going on.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
very interesting.
you get to know yourself better than you've ever known yourself before. That's for sure.
Hmm.
Yeah. So for you're having these little kind of signs. Some people use the word glimmer for positive signs of healing. You're getting these things happening. And was yours pretty like a where's my like was yours a slow and steady healing like that, or were you like some people where it goes super down, back up?
Yeah, I would see progress for a while. I'd have this, these herxing and this kind of like, okay, it's working. And then I would almost start to get, I think, a little bit sick, like from taking all the antibiotics, right? And all the medications and things. I think it would become, I'd get really nauseous. Honestly, I think that's mostly the biggest symptom that would come up. And that would cause me to switch or wean off of things, is because I make progress, kind of go up this hill and then start to go down again with symptoms that weren't necessarily Lyme and maybe were more about the treatments I was doing for prolonged periods of time. And so
Oh,
then I
okay.
would kind of stop doing them, and wean off of them and feel pretty good for a while. And then the stress would come back and start everything all over again. But each time that happened, the symptoms were never as bad as the last time. So that was also encouraging that
Okay.
it was definitely frustrating and discouraging when things would come back and I'd get the tingling again and different symptoms, but it was also encouraging to know that, like, okay, it's a little bit better though. So
Yeah.
it must be working even if it's continually coming back.
Yeah. So even though you had those dips, they're getting less. And I also heard you mention a bit about you took some breaks. I'll use the word burnout. You don't have to use that word, but would you say it's because you got burnt out, or was it because you felt you were well enough that you could stop? Or is it because you just needed to take a little time out in order to potentially come back the next round and still have the stamina to do that?
Yeah, I think it was a bit of burnout. It was a bit of, I've been doing this for what feels like forever and I am better. And so I would think maybe I'm good enough. And so maybe I'll just give it a rest and not be taking, 15 different things a day, every day, and needing IVs and all of this. Because too, at the same time, I was working and trying to have this career, a job and all of this, and managing the treatments and feeling like I was getting pulled, all these different directions. And so I think it was a lot of like, okay, I feel good. Maybe this is good enough and I can just live with this and not have to
Yeah.
do this anymore. And then it would go downhill eventually. But yeah.
And do you regret any of those breaks, or do you stand by them and say, I needed to do those breaks type of thing?
I think I stand by them, but there were definitely times when the symptoms would come back and I would be like, "Oh no, should I have not stopped?
Oh,
Like did
okay.
I just give it more, right? Like did I
Yeah.
give it time to creep back in and
Yeah.
come back? Because it feels like I wasted that time fighting it, right? Because all of it came back again. So now that I feel like I'm probably 95% better, I'm like, okay, cool. Like the breaks were okay. I
Mhm.
needed to do that. Clearly, if I'd kept going, maybe my system really wouldn't have had the ability to keep fighting later. So it's
Yeah.
hard to know, but
Yeah.
hindsight, I'm okay with it.
Yeah. Good to know. I've also taken some breaks in mine too. Mine were heavily just so like not full. I've always been on antimicrobials and things, but I also needed to. There's times with my treatments because there's takes up so much of my day that I was starting to feel pretty burnt out and just needed to just yeah, I'm supposed to be doing these detox things, but there have been times where for my mental health, I've had to say, not so much this week, actually. I'm going to skip like a couple. I'm going to skip this liver flush because of other symptoms complicating it. I bring that up to show the diversity for each unique individual in that. What I also heard you say in there is that your body was able to respond to it still, even with your breaks. So for people to know that you don't want to give pathogens like years if you can avoid it, like you don't want to delay treatment for, you do want to get to it, but your body might surprise you and it might be able to pick you up because as you've been healing, you haven't had a chance to kind of test what it's now capable of since you've done some more treatment, you take a break, and then it's like, hey, I can keep fighting for you, even if you take that break.
It's a really good point, though, too, is I think if you let it persist, if you let the infection persist, stuff can come up down the road. So you're right. You do want to treat it and get on it. And I think that was my big battle, is I never knew for sure, because diagnostics are tough, right? It's, I'm testing positive, but it's antibodies. So maybe my body's still just producing antibodies and I'm actually better, right? But I think it was I didn't know what 100% was anymore.
Yeah.
And so when I thought I was good enough, like, I didn't really realize that I still had symptoms.
Yeah. And so you would say that you feel sort of 95% to maybe a pre-illness health. We know that we can't go back to that exact same because we've transformed so much. But for you, about 95%. And what symptoms would you say are sort of remaining for you?
I think it's mostly flares. Every day, I'm feeling pretty good every day at this point. It's mostly just when I do get through these some stressful periods, I can have it creep back a little bit. And mostly it's brain fog. Mostly it's kind of like not thinking straight, like I'm having a hard time gathering my words or remembering certain things. And then I have some kind of gut issues too, still sticking around. The biggest thing is my vagus nerve is very overactive. And so I don't know if that's Lyme. I don't know if that's post-treatment. I don't know if that's just my body's changed since I started treating this, right?
Super common. So again, not medical advice, but what we've been hearing is there's a few different reasons. Pathogens themselves can directly, because they can get every tissue and cell in your body primarily. So if there's pathogens directly in that area, it can be damaged. For those that are unfamiliar, the vagal nerve is involved in helping us shut off or shut down the fight or flight stress response, which can release too many hormones, which can over time also weaken your immune system. And so you want to ideally be able, a healthy person without the damage in that area, they can have a stress response, they can have that flush of hormones like animals in the wild, like, whoa, a threat. But then they start coming down, right? So for us, they stay threat, stress hormones. And we sit here and do these things and we're like, why are these, the breathing's not quite cutting it. And it's because, if the vagal nerve itself is damaged, sometimes you need a little work there. Or the other thing that can happen if it's not the pathogens, some nerve pathways and neurological issues can also affect our ability to properly utilize that and shut it down, stress responses too. There's sort of some areas within that people are exploring that can be helpful. I recently had this machine on my neck. It's a vagal nerve stimulator, and wow, we put the pressure a little too hard on it when it went, because I felt super sick after. And they're like, okay, that's a little bit too much vagal nerve stimulation. But that's sort of why people use humming, because the vibrations can help if you can't shut down your stress response. Some people, but not just like a high pitch without any vibrations. It has to have the like the actual vibrations. Whatever you want to hum, that can teach it again to slowly help it activate. Depending, everybody's different with what pathogens might still be affecting it if their treatment is there and such. But sort of also where some of those brain neurological programs are sort of headed is that direction.
Yeah, it's fascinating. This is really informative for me too, because awesome. I've just been looking into this in the last few months.
And it's frustrating because typical stress reduction strategies are not as effective for the vagal nerve. So you can get quite frustrated. You could be doing your everything else, like the breathing and everything else, and that can still. And other people I've interviewed express similar, where they're now back to work. They're at that phase of healing, but they're very, very fragile to stress. And so that kind of all plays into it. And that's it can be frustrating because you're like, I did everything. Wait, and now I've got to do some rehabilitation to the vagal nerve. Like, you say vagal nerve to people and they're like, what is that? Like, but us, we have to literally rehabilitate not one thing, it's 1,000 sometimes. So
exactly. Yeah. And it's tricky too, because like we talked about before, stress can be a trigger for Lyme symptoms, right? And for the infection to come back. And so with stress, and now I'm having this vagal nerve response and things happening. And at first it was like, is this Lyme? Is this coming back? But I, have been able to sort of pull apart what that feels like versus this. So
yeah, that's awesome that it sounds like you're gaining so much insight to it as you go through it. Insight that you may or may not have ever had a chance to explore with yourself. I talk to myself in a different tense, but you're going to be like, no, like, I can't do this for stress, or I have to be able to do this. And you're going to be guiding your own ship.
That's the goal.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah, exactly.
And hopefully not right into a wall. You're going to guide it around the walls. And
right.
There you go.
Now I know what those walls
on what do you need to do day to day to sort of keep yourself within a non-flared state today?
Yeah, I have been actively sort of sorting this in the last few months too. And what I found is electrolytes are huge for me. I'm very prone to be dehydrated.
Yeah.
And I also drink a lot of coffee. So consistent electrolytes and taking a multivitamin and some of the supplements that are a little more relaxing and kind of help me manage my stress and things. But not a lot, not as much as I took when I was in active treatment or even just right after. I've been trying to kind of hone in on the really specific pieces. So those are sort of more of the supplemental things. And then also just a lot of focus on how do I have routine in my days? How do I have activity, like being active every day and moving, and being in New York's great because I'm walking all the time. And when I'm not here, I really notice a difference in how I feel when I'm not just getting my 10,000 steps a day. So doing those things and kind of just trying to set some goals for myself with, activity and like just doing yoga for a specific, I do find these challenges with my favorite YouTube yoga guy, and I do those, or whatever it might be that's kind of keeping me mindful about my physical health without obsessing over symptoms that might seem like symptoms, right? But it's really just, okay, I'm tired or I'm dehydrated or things like that.
And the electrolytes is also, we hear that quite commonly too, prone to dehydration. And some of us are prone to, if we don't have a full diagnosis of POTS, some of us are prone to POTS symptoms regardless. So sometimes before we exercise or sauna or things like that, sometimes we'll need to make sure we have our electrolytes in there so we feel less crappy after. So
yes, exactly.
Yeah.
It's funny you mentioned
all the things we do. We just want to feel less crappy. So yeah.
Right. Yeah. And it's funny you mentioned POTS because they tested me so many times for that, and I never tested officially positive, right? But man, the symptoms.
Yeah, you could still have the symptoms of POTS without the official diagnosis, for sure. Back a little bit with your journey. You said you weren't quite as enmeshed in the social groups. You had your little family posse with some healthy competition going on there. What were the what would you say were the hardest parts about the Lyme journey? Like the most heartbreaking, to say the least. And I know we could probably list many.
Yeah. I think there were a few moments that were really distinct. The seizure experience was very traumatic, like you said. That was really a hard time for me. I was really having some existential, what's my life going to look like? What's going on? How's this going to work? And so really, I think that's just the beginning of any Lyme journey, right? And what does this diagnosis mean? Where's this treatment going to go? Is it going to work? I don't know. It's very scary and sort of unknown. That was probably one of the big moments. I think treatment was hard because, again, you don't know what's going to work and what's not. And then balancing that with working at a job where I really wanted to perform well, and I was around all these really smart people, and I was having brain fog and I couldn't remember the last thing I said, and they're just barraging with all this. It was so frustrating. And I remember feeling really, at times, just that, tremendous imposter syndrome, right? Like this, what am I doing here? Like, am I even capable of this? Mostly get emotional because it was just so hard. It was so hard and frustrating, and really felt like this disease had taken so much from me, I guess, in these experiences of this was my plan for my life, or this is what I want for my life. And usually I can just push myself really hard to get through it. But in these moments, I would do that because I was angry and I didn't want this disease to take anything from me, and then it would set me back so far, And so those experiences were really challenging because I think I was just so, angry, frustrated, passionate about just getting through it and pushing through it, and then that doesn't work, right? It really doesn't work. It really puts you back in a bad spot. And so those I vividly remember a few different times where I'd be working and just wanting so badly to feel normal and be able to perform like I saw my coworkers all doing or my friends all doing, and needing to go get an IV on the weekend because if I didn't, I couldn't get through the week,
Right, yeah.
So,
such a different thing going on for you than those around you, right? Like they have no idea how hard just treatment is, like to get through one day is. And it sounds like you're also trying to, in a competitive workforce also, where your brain is your best asset, and coming up with really quick new things, constant. If you're not coming up with those things, sometimes then your peers are pulling a little bit like ahead in your workforce. And so I could imagine, especially also with you being a young age too, to be dealing with that for sure. And I heard you mention the imposter syndrome there. And in short form, not a technical definition, again, that's just basically when you're in a role of some sorts and you're performing a task or working as a certain thing, and your brain has not quite caught up to the fact that you're actually competent enough to be doing it. And so for me, let's see where I had imposter syndrome. I think when I was a new nurse, some of the roles that I was entrusted to do felt a little bit imposter. I'm like, wait a second, I just graduated. Like I'm working as a charge nurse, kind of like scratching my chin. I'm like, oh, is this right? Like, are you guys sure about this? And they're like, yeah, you got this, Lacey. I'm like, but are you sure? Like, because I'm doing it, but I'm not really sure, kind of thing. So that's sort of an example of imposter syndrome. For you, how did that show up for you in different roles or in your workforce?
Yeah, it was a lot of the same thing, questioning myself, feeling like I shouldn't be in the room, or feeling like, oh, I'm being given this task and how can I possibly, is this really what I should be doing, or am I really capable of this? And then having the limitations layered on top of that of being sick, and almost having a skewed perception of my capability because of that, right? Like thinking that, well, I must have come off like I didn't know what I was talking about, or I just said I lost my train of thought and now I look dumb, or whatever it might be. And you never feeling comfortable to tell anyone that I was sick ever, right? I just never even brought it up because it felt like it would be giving it power and recognition, right? Like I don't want to use that as a crutch or something. But at the same time, I think I took for granted that it's not really, right? It's not necessarily, and just being there and showing up and doing what's best for yourself is what matters, and sort of having grace for yourself too. In those moments. So that was sort of I vividly remember, talking to my manager and on the verge of tears and just being like, I'm so sorry. I have this sickness where I lose my train of thought and I can't get the words. And, I'm just so embarrassed because of XYZ, because we had just had a presentation or something. And he was like, I couldn't tell at all. I don't know what you're talking about.
Hey? Yeah.
And I was like, oh my gosh, maybe this isn't as obvious, right?
Yeah.
As it feels. And that was a really big, and then I really almost cried.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, okay. Like, so much pressure on yourself to fight this disease and act like nothing's wrong and be normal. And sometimes it's all just self-imposed stress too.
And self-imposed expectations that don't quite align with how sick we are. So you're hitting another really key point there. And I think that a lot of us have multi-systemic pressures. So sometimes without noticing it, sometimes we feel pressured maybe to be working same hours. Right. That in itself is not always realistic for us, period. There might be years where we're not. But a lot of us, like you, we get out there anyways and we try it, right? So it sounds like you're eventually kind of coming around to giving yourself permission, maybe looking back, you might even be like, I wish I gave myself more permission to be sick, because nobody else really gives us permission to be sick. So we sort of also don't give ourselves permission to be sick. And that's a constant reminder every day, because we have brain and memory issues. So we might remember that in one moment, and guess what? We forget it an hour later at work again. Yes. So we need sometimes actual stickers. Like, no, is this a realistic expectation of yourself?
Mm-hmm.
And if
Exactly.
you look back at it, we'd be like, holy crap, we did a whole lot that we equally could have just like done medical treatments or rehabilitation that day too.
Right.
So,
Mm-hmm.
and then the other thing you actually touched on there, maybe with or without knowing, is so it's a permission to be sick. Oh, no, I'm drawing. See, this is exactly what happens. We draw complete blanks. So, so we'll cancel that thought and then just see if it comes back later. There's no guarantees that it's going to come back later. So,
Yep, I've been there.
exactly, yeah. So people like us were understanding, but
Yep.
actually, when this happens in front of other people, it's
Mm-hmm.
quite the thing, and you have to remember to be really compassionate with yourself. But that goes
Right.
back to what you're saying, is that give ourselves permission to be sick, if because no, a lot of other people are not going to give us that permission to be sick. So yeah,
Exactly.
yeah,
Well, and at the end of the day, it happens to other people too, is what I wanted to say. Like it might feel really obvious for us and like our unique limitation, and it is. It's definitely a challenge, but people without Lyme lose their train of thought too. So it's definitely having that grace and realizing that we're all humans and
exactly. So we've chatted about the hardest things for you. Let's
I
see.
actually had one more
Do
that I
it.
wanted
Yeah,
to touch on.
do it. Add on.
So the very last one, that was the most recent. I was sort of towards the end of my treatment, and in that phase where again I felt really pretty good, and at this point was like, I think I'm really actually in remission, but I still had this tachycardia, these like heart racing and heart palpitations and things like that. And it would really cause a lot of problems for me with exercise and jump up to 260, and then I'd have to stop everything.
Yeah.
Um, and so this was another one of those really kind of traumatic moments with my Lyme experience, because we thought, well, maybe it's not Lyme, maybe it's really just tachycardia. We went to a cardiologist at Mayo Clinic, which is like a big hospital network in the US, and they said, oh, we can do surgery on this. And I thought, okay, great, like I've been dealing with this for a really long time. Heart surgery is a big deal, but also, you're saying it's 99% or whatever they said, very confident that they can fix this, no big deal. And they'd done the testing and stuff. And so I went into this experience, and I want to bring this up just because I think other people might experience the same thing. You go through this, and they recommend the surgery, and I go in, and I was obviously terrified because I'd never had a surgery like this before, and it's an ablation, so it's not open heart surgery. They have a special way to do it with little robots and
Yeah,
things that
it's still the heart is a sensitive place though. There's a few places that
yeah.
is for people. It's like the necks, the brain, and the heart areas. Especially, it's like you just don't really want people poking in there if you can prevent
Well,
it. You just
absolutely.
prefer not to have that.
Oh my gosh. And that was my thought afterwards. I'm like, no one's ever been in my heart before, and now they have. Like, what if they mess stuff up in there, right? Exact. So true. But so when I was going through this experience, I'm freaking out, and they knock me out and they do surgery. And at one point during the surgery, I actually woke up while they were doing the surgery, and my heart was like pounding, and it was super scary. And this was like one of those moments again where I'm like, oh, this is like crazy. And they knocked me back out, and I wake up from the surgery, and I found out that they couldn't get the tachycardia to trigger like they usually can. So they were pumping me with adrenaline to get my heart rate
So
to
you could
go.
probably feel that in a sense.
Yeah, it brought me out of the anesthesia, which was crazy. And then they told me it didn't work. So they did all this and this whole heart surgery, and then it didn't even work. And most likely because this tachycardia is a side effect of my Lyme diagnosis, right? And having some sort of electrical issue that they can't really cure how they typically would if it presented for normal purposes. So that
Wow.
was my last really like, oh my gosh, this is crazy
Intense.
that
Yeah.
this disease is, yeah. They don't, obviously, this again is my experience, and they can't say for sure that it's because it's Lyme causing this, but I've talked to other patients who have similar tachycardia and
Yeah.
heart racing and things. So,
There's all
yeah,
kinds of heart issues it can cause. Yeah, many.
right.
Yeah. So
Yes.
for people, you should always still go get it checked out by your doctor of sorts, 100%.
Absolutely.
But underlying, sometimes their tests will not properly capture Lyme and co-infection related heart issues until later phases. So it might just show normal, but it doesn't mean it's not real. Doesn't mean that it's not very difficult to cope with.
So just another experience again where I'm like, man, this is this is a tough road. And I think everyone, you know, who goes through this disease has their own experiences where you just never know what it can cause. Yeah, that was just a really discouraging moment in the whole process.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I think what I've learned from this is you are going to have things. You're going to have health things most likely at some point in your life. And it really just matters how you prioritize your health and get through it. And you're really responsible for advocating for that and, you know, putting health first and all of that. So
definitely.
Yeah.
So hopefully, Payton, for you and people like us, when we're all 80 plus, hopefully we're just going to be like, I've been there, done this. I know what to do. Here, come see me. We'll be like the old person at the home where everybody's sitting around. They're like, please help me, this symptom. And we're like, oh, yeah, no worries. We got this.
Exactly. That's what I'm thinking too. It's all experience. Right? We're just experts now. So we can be experts forever.
Yeah. And actually, while you were telling me that, you sparked at the end of it, you sparked what I couldn't remember before that also.
Oh, great.
And it was to ask you how these illnesses have affected your overall confidence.
That is such a great question.
Yeah, and you can ponder if you want. Take your time.
Yeah, it's such a good question because I think it's positive and negative, right? I think there's confidence I've gained in understanding my body and understanding my health and being so aware of when I'm doing well or not and knowing what I need to do to make sure that I'm feeling my best and all of that. I think too, being confident in the purpose that I feel like this has given me. I think this has really been something where I like to think there's a reason I got Lyme and that my whole family has Lyme, but I also think there's a reason that we were able to get into remission. And that's what this our work with Lymeless has become, is sort of this like, okay, we were lucky enough to find remission and get better and be able to have the skill set that we've developed and I've been able to do all this, and so now it's time to like do something with it, right? I've been able to have this experience, and so now I'm just feel really very confident in the fact that now's my turn to show up and do something about it, right? I think there's confidence there. The flip side is I think there's maybe a lack of confidence around and maybe I'd call it a little bit of fear, right, around this coming back. Always, you know, There's always going to be a little bit of fear around, is it really gone? And am I going to have this come back later? Am I going to give this to my kids? Right? Like those are some of the scariest things for me when I'm thinking about the future. And so maybe a little bit of a lack of confidence in those areas.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, I think what I've learned is just have to trust that things are going to work out and they happen for a reason, and just kind of, I don't know, hanging on to the strength that I've developed throughout this experience. Lyme warriors, they're called warriors for a reason.
Yeah, you don't want to mess with the person who's coming out the other end of these illnesses, because they might be learning their voice a bit differently. I've had a few situations, like you could probably tell from me, like I don't really have a big history of yelling, but there's been certain times like where I've yelled and I'm like, who is this person? What is this? Like, so like you don't want to mess with that person. They may be rebuilding their confidence, but guess what? Confidence is even more sturdy than like the broken confidence, a confidence that's been broken and rebuilt from the bottom up. That confidence is terrifying in a good way. So yes, we might have the lack of confidence when we're kind of stammering, we're not healed yet, we're performing at high levels and stuff. That's expecting a lot of us. But we might be getting our voice, we might be getting our boundaries, not putting up with what doesn't align for our health and saying no. And I also heard somewhere like no is a complete sentence. That's social media somewhere I saw that. No is a complete sentence. I wouldn't want to mess with coming out the other end Lyme warrior, because they've been knocked down probably more times than other people can count. And that's just one day in their life. And the fact that they get back up is unbelievable.
Right, exactly, right? That's exactly what
Yeah.
I totally agree. Really understanding yourself and being able to say, like, no, I know exactly what I need. I know exactly what's going on. Or at least I know I need to set a boundary here.
So, yeah,
Hmm.
be kind to them if you're external to the community. Know that you might not understand what they're going through, but it can be a lot. And us to remind ourselves to be very kind and set realistic expectations on ourselves will
Hmm.
also be very helpful for us going forward. So, and prevent us from having those flare ups. Go ahead, you've got something, I can
Yeah.
tell.
Well, I
Maybe
was
not,
going to say,
or maybe contemplative.
no, I think that's so true. And I think maybe one of the you're making me think about one of the big things too to remember as a patient or someone who's outside of it too is it takes a lot of strength just to go through this. You know, like you can feel really, I felt really weak going through the disease and the illness because it was like, man, I can't do this. I can't do that. I feel this. I feel that. But at the end of the day, just getting through it is so strong. And we have to remember that. And I don't know if that sounds cheesy, but
Nope.
it's so true. You know, I think patients just need to be reminded of that. And maybe if you're someone who's supporting someone who's treating Lyme, being that person to remind them, like, hey, it's okay that you're struggling because you're getting through it. Like, that's so much strength right there. Um, yeah.
Exactly. Just even showing up. Some days that's the equivalent of just even sitting up in bed. And
Hmm.
that is bang on for that person that day. That is within a reasonable goal, even a bit past it. A couple other questions that I was just curious about, and then we'll kind of transition to you letting people know about your Lymeless app here, which is super important as well, and the story kind of leading up to that. Did Lyme and co-infections for you have any effects on like reproductive hormonal symptoms? And did you happen to have any specific Bartonella, like foot and shin pain or rage or any of those things? Or did the symptoms just kind of all blend together? Because some of it that you literally can't pull apart which diagnosis is which symptom.
So to your first question, hormonally, I honestly, it was really hard to pull apart if I would just had funky hormones or if it was from Lyme and co-infections because I kind of had funky hormones leading up to my diagnosis too.
Oh, okay.
So so maybe, but also I think at one point I do remember taking some different supplements to try to sort of regulate my hormones a little bit, and I did have a little bit of that like rage too. And that's funny you mentioned that because I think I had like high testosterone at one point, and maybe
Yeah.
we thought that's why,
Mm-hmm.
but I didn't realize it's a Bartonella symptom. So that could have been the reason too, because I haven't had it, since I've treated everything. But
Oh, interesting.
um,
Mm-hmm.
definitely some of those like bizarre out of the blue, like what is it? Why do I feel like I need to sprint
Yeah.
right now when I'm playing tennis and messing up? Um, yeah, and then Bartonella specific, it's tough because I do feel like they blended
Yeah.
together. I definitely had a lot of neurological symptoms that I think might have been Bartonella related, but
Okay. Yeah. Okay,
yeah.
thank you for sharing. Yeah, I was just kind of curious there. I know that some people, like depending how long it can affect all the hormones. Testosterone, females have a certain degree of biological females have testosterone too,
Hmm.
progesterone, estrogen, and there's even one called a sex binding globulin that can go haywire in people that can cause
Okay.
all the other ones to go funky too. And it's
Interesting.
similar, like yeah, I'm not sure in your situation, but because it can affect almost like so many cells in your body, hormones are not exempt. So a lot of people in the community might show up with super high estrogen, like estrogen dominance and
Hmm.
testosterone imbalances. And I'm on a bioidentical hormone. I started on it years ago. Those things were just also messed up
Hmm.
individually. So it's helpful for now. So we'll see. I'd love to get off it one day, but we shall
Hmm.
see. So to be determined, as they say. So in terms of mental health symptoms, I think you mentioned some depression.
Hmm.
I think you mentioned anxiety and some social anxiety.
Hmm.
Um, did you have those symptoms a little bit before illness? Some of us, they get worse with illness. Some of us, it's a completely new symptom.
Yeah, they were completely new symptoms that came up about 6 months into treatment. And I started developing really out of the blue, like pretty aggressive social anxiety and some depressive states too. It's hard for me to know exactly if it was treatment, if it was herxing, it all came on right after the pandemic started too.
Mm-hmm.
So, could have been that.
Yeah.
And on top of living in Seattle in the winter, I just had a lot going on at that point. Um, but definitely out of the blue, sort of, and seemed a bit related to treatment too,
Okay.
like nursing
Yeah.
for me.
So social anxiety. Were you able to find anything that helped that, or did you sort of ride those out until your pathogens were a little more under control with the treatments?
Yeah. While it was happening and I was treating it, I was doing therapy and they were kind of teaching me some of those, some tactics around like identifying what it was that was causing that experience. So like, why am I feeling the social anxiety, for example? What's is it, am I afraid of something? Am I, what it might be? And then I kind of did this thing where I'd sort of immerse myself in those situations, like be like, okay, I'm worried about this happening, so I'm going to go do it and see if that thing happens that I'm afraid of. Most of the time it didn't,
Oh.
so I kind of like would train myself out of that. That was a strategy that my therapist at the time had given me was, if you're anxious about this, try to think of the worst case scenario. What is it that you're really worried about? And then go see if it happens.
Yeah, that's a really neat way to put it. Yeah, go test it then. See what
Right.
happens. Does it happen? Yeah.
Yeah, so it kind of trained me out of it a little bit and helped me manage it in those instances. But I also saw a lot of improvement after treatment too. Pretty soon.
Good to hear. Yeah, and also neat to know because everybody's so different. Some they have like a really substantial worsening and some new ones. In your case, it seems likely induced by all of these illnesses and stuff because a newer onset for you. And you mentioned some environmental factors. I'm assuming there's not a lot of like direct sunlight. Is that what you meant by Seattle?
Yes.
Is that what you meant? Okay.
Cloudy all day, every day.
Yeah, that's very challenging for certain people, especially if they're predisposed to the seasonal types of moods. For you, I heard you say in there that you feel like it happened for a reason. You've mentioned some of your most challenging points. So walk us through. So you and Carter, it sounds like at a certain point are thinking like, hey, we want to do something about this. Kind of walk us through a little bit more that process to getting to where you guys are at now with testing phases of your Lyme app.
Yeah. So early on when we were going through treatment and being patients and things, my tech brain and my tech background was kind of like, wow, this could be better, right? It was so much trial and error. We had an excellent Lyme doctor, right, who had helped my mom go from bedridden to, back to who she was. He was very good. But it still took months for each of us to get to a point where we were seeing any progress each time, because it was, well, try this and then see if this helps. And it was such a long process. And I think a lot of patients could probably resonate with that. And so going through that myself, I just kept thinking, there has to be a better way for this to happen. And on top of there being technology being a great solution for problems that need personalization, like treatment, there were also a lot of tactical challenges, right? I was taking 10 to 15 things a day and pretty much never would remember to take my droppers, right? The herbals and things, because it was so inconvenient to me. And I would have a whole list of all the things, and then I'd put it somewhere and then I'd lose it. And it was just, I was always trying to go back to my portal and figure out what I needed to take. So on top of the really complex, cool personalization piece, there's also the tactical questions of treatment management and storing all of your documents, right? All the different labs. And I went to 10 different doctors at the end of the day, even though really only worked with a couple long term, and then going to appointments too, and checking in after a month. And my doctor's asking me, well, how are you feeling? And it's always recency bias. And for some reason, whenever I'd go to him, I'd always feel pretty good.
Okay, yeah.
So I was like, oh, I'm pretty good. There's just this little thing and this little thing. And I'd forget that 2 weeks prior, I was totally in the dumps and feeling horrible and toxic and awful. So, so I think going through that and being in the thick of it all, it was kind of just a process of identifying where things could be better. And then once we both were feeling better, it was kind of more of a conversation of hey, maybe we should actually do something about this. Maybe we can actually build a tool for people that will help them go through this process, be able to manage it better. But also, as we started talking to more patients, we realized that our experience, where we found a good Lyme literate doctor right away, got on treatment right away, and kind of relatively quickly figured out what worked and what didn't, isn't everyone's experience. And so how do we bring that to other patients? And that's sort of where Lymeless came out of was sort of that thought process.
Okay. So bits of your own personal experiences, your familial experiences with Lyme. When did you know that that it moved from the contemplation phase, that's where you're talking about it, to the we're going to do this? When did that happen?
That was a very specific moment for me because I'd kind of work on an app for a little bit at different stages, right? Where I'm like, well, maybe I'll just do this on the side. And then, well, maybe I'll just try this here. And it never really worked out because I was always so busy with work and other things. But actually, right after that heart surgery, it was like 6 months after, I was running in Central Park, and my tachycardia came back and my heart rate jumped back up above 210. And I had a similar experience that you mentioned before, where I was so angry, I was so mad. And I'm supposed to stop running and get my heart rate to go down and sort of, do the responsible thing. But I was so mad that I just kept running, and I was just blinders on, sprinting, angry, and just trying to fight back. I started to feel like terrible. I started to feel burning in my arms and my chest, and my vision started to go blurry, and I probably would have fainted, honestly, except that I came around the corner, and all of a sudden I was in the finish line of the New York Marathon. They were setting it up for the next day. And I was just like, whoa. Like, I stopped, I'm looking around, and obviously my heart rate, by stopping, I was like doing what my body needed and getting my heart rate back down. But that for me was such an aggressive moment. It was such a light bulb moment of, okay, you're going to deal with this, and you're still dealing with this, and you could do something about it for people. It's time to take ownership and sort of try to make a difference, because I think when we'd had these conversations, it was like, man, this could really help people, but is it something that we can really make happen? And I think in that moment it was a really big wake-up call of like, what are you doing? Like, this is it. Like, why are you wasting your time on anything else?
Because interesting. That's so interesting that it was around that time. Like, you had that experience with running, and then it was just like, okay.
Yeah. Yeah. For some reason, I was just like, I think maybe it was all the adrenaline and the emotion of it all, but I was just like, this is it. Like, I am putting my foot down. Like, Lyme, you are not, no more. Like, I'm going to do something with my life about this, right? I'm going to try to make a difference for this. So that was like really the big moment for me, where I was like, all right, time to make a plan. Like, it was always kind of in the back of my mind of like, well, this would be awesome to do, and I want to do this eventually. And then at that point I was like, all right, so I need to learn these skills. I need to, get to this point where I can leave my job and we can make this happen, because like, there's no reason to wait.
Yeah.
Right.
And what a phenomenal like background for you guys to have to get this going. Like, what are the odds that two siblings with these backgrounds will both have Lyme disease? Their mom will have Lyme disease. It sounds like there's a positive in the lurking of another sibling. Like, what? Those are really slim odds. So you knew then, and then did you call up Carter then, or did you just kind of sit on it? Because at that point you're just recovering from some pretty intense anger running. Like, no, F you, world. That's how I envision it. So
exactly what it was. So Carter and I were actually roommates.
There you go. So you didn't have to call him. You could just say, hey.
I just ran home. And we had, like I said, we had been talking about it like, yes, we're going to do this someday. But I think at that point it was like, all right, time to make a game plan. Like, when are we going to really kick this off and make it happen? Because I think we both knew that we had to commit fully in order to really make progress.
And did you guys have any changes of optimism along the way? Like, any sort of queries were like, wait a second, maybe we might not do this? Or was it always like, we're gonna do this, here's this hiccup type of thing, and keep pushing forward?
Yeah. Honestly, it was always we're doing this. Like, we have to. I think in the back of my mind, it was always we have to do this. Like, this is the reason. I like to think it's the reason we all got Lyme, like you said. It's just, we're kind of those, like, we have a reason, we have this purpose in life, and just trying to find it. And I think for both of us, we found the purpose, and it was this.
I love hearing that. Yeah. So you've described for people sort of about the app. It sounds like you're hoping to really, really facilitate things, like especially for the people using the app, and it will trickle down. It will facilitate to clinics and things like that too, when they have this organization at their fingertips. So to kind of just go through a few of the features for us here, I know that you can track symptoms like reactions to medications. I believe you can input your medication list in there. And I think I remember you guys saying that you could put certain days. It's like, actually, this is a every 2-day medication, that type of thing.
Right. Yes.
Which is
the Lyme scheduling
can potentially be super helpful. I know that you can also load certain test results in there, I believe, at some point in the app, because you're in development, right? So I like to specify that for people that they're not rushing along, they're doing as their health allows, and they're going to update us as things unfold. What did I miss there in the description of the Lymeless app?
Yeah, the one thing that I also haven't mentioned yet is our AI nurse, Ella. And we use the word nurse, but it's really, she's kind of a companion for patients. And so I think she's the thing that has kind of developed over the last year or so as we've been really seriously kind of thinking through this. And she's kind of modeled after some of the people in our experience and when talking to patients, trying to be that resource, right? So she kind of has two parts. One is educational. So she's going to be trained on really specific Lyme literate information, the best resources that we can find as a community, not just the open web. So trying to empower patients to get information, because I think a big thing about my experience and other patients' experiences that we've talked to is a lot of self-education and advocating for yourself in different conversations. So she has an education piece. And then the other side of it is the symptom intake piece. So being able to work with her to sort of track really granular symptoms and things. Down the road, we would like to be able to help match patients to providers based on their symptomatic presentation and then the different co-infections that they have, because as you know, like different providers are better at treating some things than others.
And they kind of specialize in certain niches or certain types of treatments.
Exactly. Yep. And some providers use antibiotics and some don't, and some patients want that. And so sort of being able to match patients to those providers and go a level further and validate that too. And our big goal is to be able to, have patients using this with those providers and being able to say, yes, this provider is actually making progress with these patients. They're actually effective. And sort of bringing that, because I think there are resources out there for finding Lyme literate practitioners today, but it is hard to know which ones are really effective, and really making a difference. And so combining data with patient feedback to be able to say this provider is actually making a difference for patients that present a certain way. And so kind of bringing all of this like intelligence together to help make the experience better for patients is the goal.
It's very exciting.
Yeah. And then down the road too, I guess it's sort of a bigger picture goal. Our bigger vision is to hopefully bring this together and be able to empower research that brings a standard of care and ultimately gets things covered by insurance. Like that's our big North Star. And it's a very, ambitious goal, but that would be the best thing in our opinion, is finding a standard of care that really works and then making it so the burden isn't so high on patients for paying for treatment.
Right. Well, I know for me, being able to show that trend, if you're one of those people who's struggling to get the practitioner's attention, and then you could just be like, here.
Exactly.
Like
yes.
And then I even had a potential question pop into my head with the analogy. I was thinking about the app and I was thinking about it and I was like, even if, because you know how sometimes there's gaslighting, right? Like I've experienced a boatload of it myself. So I thought of a question, like potentially even using that app in the future me when I have it, I'd be like, what do you make of this trend then, sir or madam or whatever? Like, can you please explain to me why then with this data you're thinking what you're thinking? So I might not be able to get the full like advocacy words out, but I can at least make them explain themselves. And when they're explaining themselves, they might make them kind of be like, oh, this actually sounds quite stupid when I'm saying it out loud. And then you go, interesting. You don't say it out loud in your head. You're like, yeah, I was thinking the same thing. But I didn't say it.
So true though, right? Being able to advocate for yourself. And we have enough going on. Like as patients, you're dealing with the brain fog and the things too, and then you have to go fight. Like it's so much. So just...
Wait, I'm going to pause you right there. So you said, actually, can you repeat what you said? Because I got so excited I lost my train of thought.
Yeah, just as patients, we're dealing with so much, right? And so you're dealing with all of this stuff, and then you have to go fight.
And then
Yeah.
to go advocate. So, okay, so I'm going to put a little scenario in here with that. So if I was ever working with a patient, hypothetically, in no specific healthcare setting that I'm specifying, and they had neurological issues, whether it's showing by scans or visibly by talking to them, that person rarely has the full expectation on their shoulders to be able to advocate for themselves, because neurologically that's impaired. So yes. It's obviously we want to advocate for ourselves, but for them it's 800 times as hard, because they're not finding the words. Some of them are not even intaking the information accurately at that point. And then we're saying to them, yeah, go fight. Good luck. Yes. And they're like, oh, I feel like I might not win this one, So for them to have, I think Carter mentioned the word like additional credibility for the Lyme and co-infection community, is that, again, to just kind of have that. But it's so interesting to me from the healthcare perspective. I would never expect someone who had just had like a stroke or neurological damage to be like, advocate for yourself, right? But we're put into those positions where we have to. So if you're people supporting these people, know that that's a heavy burden. So that's why I also like the idea of that app, to kind of just be like, again, just there you go.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that's super awesome. And so I know you guys are taking your time to do your due diligence. And I know I mentioned to Carter that what I was really impressed with you guys about is that you're two, I'm going to call you young people because I'm older than you. You're two young people that actively sought out people of all ages and backgrounds to give you feedback. I was very impressed with that, because there's a lot of older adults that are not able to take feedback, and younger adults as well. So to hear your perspective, what made you willing to ask for that feedback and take it and not be aggressive or offended with the responses? Because that's super impressive. So.
Yeah, thank you. I think at the end of the day, we know both of our experiences were so different, right? And in order to build something really transformational for patients, we need to have all of the experiences accounted for. You can't just build something that works well for me or works well for Carter, but something that actually makes a difference for patients. And so I think a really big part of that is talking to as many as we can and getting that feedback, but then not just stopping there. And that's sort of what this beta program is, what we call it, that we've been running is. It's working with a small group of patients who are using the app, and then taking in their feedback and genuinely asking for, both positive and negative. Tell us what's wrong. Tell us what's working. Tell us why you don't want to use it, because we want to make sure this is actually valuable for patients. And I think the best way to do that is just to work directly with the people who are using it. So that's been our whole philosophy around it since we started.
That's a very, very mature thing. Because as I say, a lot of people, I remember I specifically sent you guys a message. I was one of your early consults when you're gathering some information moving forward with this. And I remember I said, do you want positive and negative feedback, question mark? Right away, you're like, yes, please, both. And I was just like, what? I'll try to give both then. And that was, really impressive. Would you say you were a resilient person before you got sick? Or did a lot of your resilience come from being sick and you had to pull it out on the spot and continue it going forward?
I think that I thought I was really resilient, right? I thought I was very strong, and I had experiences early on in life where I was, I went from South Dakota to California and didn't know anybody. And I went through those experiences as a young person that made me feel like, oh, look at me, like I can do this. I'm stronger for it.
Right. Because not everybody would just up and leave a location, to be honest. They might be like, oh, do I have enough friends? Do I know enough people, enough relatives? So they might not just go do that. Everybody.
Right. So those experiences, I thought I had that, but honestly, going through this health experience too has been a huge eye-opener of what it means to be resilient even when you struggle, right? Even when things are working against you. It's not just that it's a hard thing, it's pushing back on you. And what are you going to do to sort of show up for yourself and be there, but also give yourself the grace to go through those experiences and acknowledge that it's hard. I think I would spend a lot of time pushing myself through things. I was as a high school athlete, and my coaches were always like, just don't think about it, just push yourself, and you'll get there. And I tried that when I was sick, and it doesn't work, right? I mentioned that before. And so I think it's a different kind of resilience now. It's kind of like an educated resilience of, like I know where to push and I know where to sit back a little bit more.
And you again highlight the key differences in each of us, because I know Carter's answer, he really wanted to get this hard stuff out of the way. So I remember he said he pushed through it, and that worked well for him. Some of us, and in your case, we push through, we get thrown back 16 steps, and then we have to climb the 16 steps to get back there, and then we're ready to fight again. And then our body might still be saying, you're doing too much. It came up in a previous interview, the doing too much, scheduling too much can be one that throws us, myself also. So I'm very cautious about scheduling. I don't do too much because that will potentially flare me up still. And you highlight the key differences and the need to do what's best for your own body, your own DNA, your own circumstances as well. I was curious, because anybody that battles these illnesses for any amount of time, to be honest, it takes resilience. You're going to get thrown back. And sometimes in one day you get thrown back like 80 times. That people don't realize, and then they interact with you and they don't understand why you're the way that you are. Well, it's like losing a sports game for people that care deeply about winning and things like that. If you lost every game, and then you still have to come out the next one, and you're still expected to, kind of win or fight type of thing. So I was curious the origins of resiliency for the Bradskys here. So and in your hardest times, was there something that ultimately just kind of got you through it?
Yeah, thinking back on it, there's so many times where it's like, man, am I ever going to get better? Is this ever going to be over? And those can be really discouraging times where it's so frustrating. I guess the biggest thing for me was knowing that my mom got through it and my brother got through it, and even though it took me twice as long and there were times where I'm like, maybe I just won't, I still sort of had hope. Maybe I'd go to sleep with that and then wake up and it was a new day, and I was like, okay, let's just have hope that this gets better. And worst case scenario, you're learning a lot about how to manage this and have life, made me really appreciate the things that when they did go well, the days I did feel good were that much better. And I think it was just a constant battle, and just reminding myself that no matter what, I'll be stronger at the end of it, even if I don't get to full remission. Okay, yeah. But it's definitely hard. I mean, it was never a like, yes, I'm confident that this is going to go well. Yeah. It's hard to have that confidence when you're in the thick of it.
Yeah. It sounds like sort of some self-talk in a way, reminders, just kind of supporting yourself, almost internally kind of coaching yourself. Like sometimes it sounds like just getting a sleep kind of, and like, okay, let's see what it looks like tomorrow. Let's at least wait to the sleep, see what happens, and then maybe tomorrow will be slightly better. Do you remember if there was anything particular in your worst time that helped you get through that, or was it the same coaching yourself to pull yourself out of it?
Yeah, coaching myself, and then I guess I do remember calling my mom in tears a few different times, right? And she would talk me through it and just remind me that, that I was going to have better days eventually, no matter what. Like it would someday would be better. And it was hard, but I think she was probably the biggest help in those moments. And she's very solution oriented, and so she'd be like, do you have your magnesium lotion? Have you taken an Epsom salt bath? Like, she'd be coming at me with all the self-care and the strategies, right? And so it did help me to feel like I was doing something, right? Where I'm like, okay, well, I'm gonna take a bath and read my book and try to sort of relax and get my mind out of this cycle of negativity. Mm-hmm. Did
she ever suggest go do an anger run by chance?
Never. No.
Perhaps we should add that to the arsenal. The
right?
tool belt, the toolkit. Yeah.
Seriously, it might be.
Yeah. So I guess going back a bit now to your app. So what's next for you guys, if you're comfortable to share a bit? I know that there's no rush, and it's whatever's within your guys' health and nervous system's ability. And so the community is understanding of that. But what's the next steps looking like for you guys in terms of more testing and, potentially launching in the distant future?
Yeah, we are working with the beta users, like I mentioned. So we have a group of, they're awesome. They've been kind of working with us and having patience through the growing pains of building an app and the glitches and things. And like you mentioned, we're really taking our time with that and making sure that we're building things that are really valuable. But also with this AI, AI is very powerful, and with great power comes great responsibility. We want to make sure we do that right too.
Yeah.
And so we're taking our time there and making sure we get a lot of iteration and feedback and all of that. So we're hoping to be able to launch this more broadly towards the end of the year. It just depends on the type of feedback we get and if we can get Ella to a place where she's behaving well.
Yeah.
and giving the right information and all of that. So that's the goal right now. But for between now and then, we are looking at expanding our beta group. And so if patients are interested in helping us with Lymeless and giving us feedback and testing it, there's the option to do that, and they can find that on our website. But that's sort of our interim phase. The next few months is just refining that piece before we try to launch it more broadly.
Okay, and so website, just for people, it's lymeless.com. Is that accurate?
Yes.
And that's LYMELESS.com. And I believe you have a social media account for Lymeless as well. So if you search that, again, spelled the same way. Is there any other methods or means that you'd like people to get a hold of you, or is it best to do website, potentially follow your social media for updates?
Yeah, those two are the best way. And then on our website, we have our email too, the info@lymeless.com. So any of those ways are great to get in touch with us. And we always really like to speak to every patient that is interested in the beta program and things. So, yeah, it'd be
yeah,
awesome.
So if anybody's listening, check that out. And if you want to give input, as Payton was just describing, they listen to it and they consider it, which is a very big deal in today's year. And so is there anything else that you'd like to share about Lymeless before we kind of pivot away from it?
I think we covered what Lymeless is today. Yeah, and I think ultimately the biggest thing that we kind of rally behind is that we want Lymeless to be not just an app, but a community and something that empowers everything else, right? There's so many organizations and groups that are trying to push the Lyme ecosystem forward and make it better for patients. And what we're kind of trying to do is connect the dots between them all. I guess our biggest thing is if you are a part of Lymeless, you'll be a part of something even bigger than that. Like, we're really trying to find a way to work with the research organizations and groups that are in clinical trials and things like that to kind of connect all of those dots. And we're, of course, very cognizant of privacy and data protection and all of that. And so all of it would be sort of an opt-in to be a part of different research and things like that. But
that's a good thing to reference, because people would be wondering, is it safe to load the people that don't do much apps and things like that are not familiar?
Right.
And I'd be assuming, like, with both your backgrounds, that would be definitely on your radar, working for Google, that you've got to have some type of security to keep patients' data especially safe, right? Because if that leaks, then no good. So
yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Top priority is the privacy and encryption and safety and all of that. And it will always be sort of an opt-in to contributing to these, research studies and things with your data.
Yep. Right. Awesome. And now, separate from Lymeless, is there anything else about your journey that you would just like to share that you've not yet had a chance to?
We really covered a lot of the bases. I think at the end of the day, what I've found, and I guess if patients are listening to this podcast, they're already doing a much better job than I did, but I had no idea there was this community when I was a patient, not at all. And so I think it's really a great community, and it's full of people who are just interested in helping each other out and connecting over this thing that can feel really isolating and really, really challenging. And so that was something that probably needed when I was going through my treatment, is knowing that I wasn't the only one. And And so this is a great first step, being a part of these communities and listening to podcasts and kind of engaging, but also I think sharing your story and being, open to sharing it with other patients is huge. And that's something that I've really struggled with up until, these times, because it is hard. It's traumatic and it's emotional, but I think it does help to hear that you're not alone too.
Did you ever ponder if you were going to do this podcast? Did you ever pivot? You're like, maybe not. It's okay to say, honestly.
Yeah, at this point, no, because I do believe that like this is so important, right? Exactly what you're doing is like spreading awareness and helping patients, other patients here, and also people who aren't patients, people who are adjacent to the community really understand, but did have to coach myself through like, okay, be open, right? Share the details. I'm not comfortable with that usually.
That's amazing, by the way. Yeah. I still sweat profusely every single interview I do. So
yeah,
I sweat profusely.
Okay, good. We're the same boat then, because
black was like, I wanted to wear, it's a sloth and it says I nap. It's nerdy. I nap, and then down here, where is it? It says periodically. Like, I wanted to show the sloth, but I was like, okay, today I just don't want to worry about lifting my arms up, so I'm gonna wear black.
Yeah, totally. So it's definitely.
I hope that you celebrate the fact that you decided to do it. That's also takes a lot of bravery. You're being very vulnerable, so I hope that you celebrate that somehow. Yeah, I don't know how. Because you don't live with, don't think you and Carter live together now, right? So you can't just celebrate next door in the next room. But I'm sure you guys will find something, and even to celebrate Carter's interview from before. So that's my ask.
Yeah, we definitely will. And I hope you know that you do an excellent job of making, you made me feel very comfortable sharing this, because these are tough topics to cover, but you do a great job.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And even with my sweaty arms, I will still do it. So yeah, I really, really appreciate that. With that being said, I think it's safe to say that you're probably helping people immensely with this app, pushing yourself to come into the public and sharing your story. We really, really appreciate that. So thank you so much for being on the Your Lyme Matters podcast. And anything else on your end? If not, that concludes our episode.
Yeah, that's everything. Thank you so much, Lacey.
Yeah, and remember to check out Lymeless on social media, follow along, check out their website, and stay in the loop. All right. Well, Thanks again. Take care, Payton.